Today, we talk about the math of damage.
Hello and welcome to today's episode of What is Tabletop. You're probably wondering why Charles is laughing. We have tried for like a minute to figure out a bit. And you might be thinking, a minute's not that long, Frank, to come up with a bit. Yeah, it is.
Especially when you work with me.
Yeah, we usually come up with bits in like 2 seconds. So,
And they're great. Not this one.
let us know what's your favorite bit we've ever done in the comments. And while you're there, like, comment, and subscribe. That's right. As you're commenting, comment again.
Comment underneath your comment. Commentception.
Yeah, that's why we know you're commenting specifically because we told you to, and not because you want to on your own. What are we talking about, Charles?
Today, we're talking about damage and the math behind it.
Yeah, so specifically, this is very importante. We've already talked about health.
Yes.
And HP. So we're not talking about like different kinds of damage and stuff like that. If you want to know about that, go check our health and HP episode where we go into the many different ways of tracking damage.
Yeah.
And how it affects your character. But instead, we're going to talk about dealing damage.
Ouchies.
Yes, because let's be honest, there's multiple ways to deal damage. Even though it might not seem like it, there's a lot of different ways to deal damage.
Frank deals me damage every day.
It's true. Just the cameras are off, so I have no liability against myself.
Oh, there's cameras.
I'm pretty sure you have to legally tell me that you're filming me. Your eyes.
My eyes are my...
Did you replace them? Is this cyberpunk where you have eyes that record?
Maybe.
All right, Charles, we want to ask the first question of the topic.
Sure. So, the first question
He's
is...
an old man. That's why he had to clear his throat.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm the oldest.
Indeed. Of the two people in this room, you are the oldest.
So, what makes damage interesting?
I think people like dealing damage. I mean, here's the thing, right? Because we could just have it be you roll to see if you hit the guy, and then the guy's dead, right?
Haha.
So we could have it be like that, where it's like, did I hit? Yes, cool. Did it like? But we have this damage step, right? I mean, if we even look at Matt Colville's Draw Steel, where they got rid of the attack possibility, like you will always hit, but you want to know how much damage you deal. That's up for uncertainty. They have said the reason they got rid of the attack roll is because it's not fun to miss, right? No. Which you disagree? Interesting. Go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I do because in real fights you miss sometimes.
But like from a game perspective, they're talking about it, right? You come in from a narrative perspective of like a story where you're like, okay, I happen to miss this fight, or like the simulation perspective. Yeah, that's fine. But like from a gamer perspective, I don't like it when I miss. Because it's like I wasted my turn. If all I do is attack and it doesn't work, I've wasted my turn, right? It's the reason everyone hates counterspell. I'm going to use my really cool spell for this thing. Yeah. Counterspell. Oh, cool. I don't get to do anything this turn. That's what people don't like.
Yeah. Well, that's why you have other people in your party who could also cast counterspell.
Yeah, but then you get into the counterspelling, and everyone hates that because then it's like, okay, wait, hold on. We have 17 counterspells going off.
I don't know. I kind of like it sometimes because... Like, yeah, if you have too many going on, there's got to be a limit in my opinion, but...
Do you enjoy missing is what I'm saying?
No, I don't enjoy it, but I understand it, I guess.
Yes, and so that's what they're saying is they're getting rid of the part that no one enjoys.
Mechanically, yes. Dealing damage is what you always want to do.
Right.
Narratively, it makes sense not to always hit.
Yes, I understand that.
Sorry.
We're not arguing about that today, Charles. We're going to argue about that in a couples counseling like we always do, okay?
That's fine.
Great. So anyway, the damage is the fun part.
That was beautiful.
Yeah, so everyone likes dealing damage.
Of course.
I wouldn't disagree with that. I think even, like, regardless of what you play, right, you could be the healer and you're like, I kind of want to deal damage.
That's fair. I hadn't thought about that because that's something I've mentioned before, with clerics, they don't get to deal as much damage. I mean, now they do, depending on the subclass you choose, but yeah.
If you look at any build guides, stuff like that,
right,
you will always find the thing they judge how good of a build it's on is how much of a max damage output can it do. And then they'll make arguments of like, well, what about burst damage? What about sustained damage over time, right? These are the questions that the build community always wonders about is it strong because of the amount of damage you do? Like, they don't care about anything else. They care about dealing damage.
The numbers. The numbers.
The numbers, Mason. Did you not play Black Ops?
I did.
Okay. So you should get that joke.
I did. That's why I left.
Thank you. But that's what makes damage interesting, and everyone loves it when the numbers are big and shiny. Shiny big numbers. If you can get to triple-digit numbers in 5th edition, everyone enjoys it. Pathfinder, that's nothing.
So I think it brings us to our next little segue into the different types of damage, right? That's how you make it interesting, right?
Yeah, so when we say different types of damage, this kind of goes into, like, the flavor of damage. Not the mechanics of damage, the flavor of it. You have kids, I can tell. Tell me you have kids without saying you have kids. Like how you flavor the damage, right? That's kind of the thing. Because we can just say I deal damage, but like how you deal damage is also equally important, right? Shooting someone with your gun, right, in Traveler isn't the same kind of damage as melting their brains with like some sort of alien logic beam or something, you know?
Yeah.
Right? Those are terrible examples. Basically, there's different ways. There's the physical attacks on us. There's the mental attacks on us. How do you track that as damage? Again, watch our HP video. We really go into depth there about like separating your pools. But if you're in a system where your health pools are separated, the kinds of damage you deal is different, right?
Yeah. And sometimes the damage isn't always going to be where it takes away your hit points either.
Right.
Sometimes the damage is going to be an effect on you.
Right. Or like, for example, in Call of Cthulhu, you have your sanity, which like you have much more sanity than you do hit points. But that means you're going to lose sanity a lot more often than you would your health. Yeah. So like the flavor of it, right? It really impacts the kind of game you're playing. It really impacts the game you're building with the different, if you start splitting your hit pools and having different kinds of damage in that regard.
So what kind of different types of damage are there?
Yeah, so that's where we get into the trickiness of it, right? So it's like you'll see in like some systems where they'll talk about like there's fire damage and cold damage and ice damage and lightning damage and earth damage and ground damage. What's the difference between those two? I don't know yet. And
there's earth and ground. Is this all in 5e?
Well, no, I think in like in Pokemon there's ground and there's rock. Those are two completely different types of Pokemon.
Interesting.
Yeah. Everyone is also confused what the difference between a ground Pokemon and a rock Pokemon is. But those exist.
I mean, maybe rocks are more enduring, you know?
We don't know. All right. And then there's dark Pokemon, which are evil Pokemon in the Japanese version, but they didn't want to use it in the English version for some reason. Yeah. But that's the thing is like, that's when you can like start getting into the nitty gritty of stuff. But the second you start labeling damage as a specific kind, it's a mechanic.
Yeah.
Right. So there's the difference between like, okay, when I attack, let's say we're playing Candela, right? And they have their like brain, body, and bleed, right? This thing physically attacks me. I take a body. Like I lose a point in that. Oh, this thing messed with my mind. I take a brain. Oh, this thing was magically like cursed me. I take it in bleed. Right? Like that's the difference there. Versus a game like D&D where it's like I deal 5 fire damage to you. That's a physical type of damage.
Yeah.
But because it's fire damage, that implies that, oh, wait, I have fire resistance. So I take half. Right. And that's where like having different damage types and categories, that's where it's like it can get into the weeds a little bit. Because then you also get things, right? Like, again, going back to 5th edition, there's the barbarian who can take, is resistant to all damage except psychic. You know what that means? If I create a custom damage type, it's resistant to it because it's all but psychic.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You can see how that informs creative design and stuff like that.
There's immunities and resistances to certain types of damages, which will also impact what. So, again, if you can't deal fire damage, you're going to have to find like, say your character, like that's something they're just proficient in. They have a lot of fire damage spells or something like that. You're going to need to think on your feet and figure out like, okay, they're not going to take any of this damage. So what can I do to cause damage? So you have to be looking at more physical potentially, or if you've got other spells that maybe deal like cold damage or acid damage, or then you have the barbarian who's immune to all damage except for psychic. How do you hurt a barbarian? Then?
Right. And then also on top of that, see, again, this is where like the build community get really interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, I can do fire damage or cold damage. The build community is like, well, we have done the math. Here's how many creatures are immune to fire. Here's how many that are immune to cold. Here's how many that are resistant to fire, resistant to cold. Here's the amount of spells for each kind. Which one, they literally are like, it is going to be better for you to have one kind of damage over the other kind because of how often it comes up.
Yeah. Right. The frequency in which these enemies appear.
Right. And so like that's where like the balance perspective comes in, right? Now, conversely, you can go off the wall and just be like, you deal psionic damage, right? And it's just like that is just a type of damage that you have, and then you never have anyone who's like resistant to psionic or fire. It's more of a flavor tacked on point where you can do it.
It kind of tells you the type of damage you'll be dealing and what.
It's definitely more of a narrative tool at that point where it's like I deal fire damage to you. Like, okay, you didn't like you deal fire damage, but that doesn't mean anything. You could also have what like Panic at the Disco does. No, that's not what I meant. What Panic at the Dojo does. I don't know what Panic at the Disco does. Maybe they play RPGs. Who knows?
They might.
Brandon Yuri, if you're watching, let us know. Yeah. Highly doubt it. And if he is, oh my gosh. The views.
I'd be super stoked.
So Panic at the Dojo has you create these very interesting and unique classes. Okay. And so when you make like a fire guy, right? He deals fire damage. But it's not like, okay, and that means there's a monster that might be resistant to fire damage. It's more that the fire damage almost tells you how the damage is going to work. So, for example, if I hit you and then I use 5 fire charges on you, you now take 5 damage over the course of several turns.
Oh, okay.
Right? And like, so basically what
it is... It's an effect at that point, and then, okay.
Yeah, it's prolonged damage over the course of several rounds.
Can you stack that?
I think you can. I haven't played enough and looked into it. But it's prolonged damage over the course of several rounds. And so what the designers did is are like, flavor wise, what is that like? That's like being lit on fire. You're going to be taking damage over time, right? If we had a cold ability, right? Maybe you take cold damage means you're now slowed by the amount of damage you take, right? So there's not just like separating the damage types into different categories for the sake of saying like fire damage is its own column, ice is its own. It could flavor it so we're like mechanically thinking, you're like, oh, it makes sense. I'm on fire. I'm going to take damage next turn. So I need to find a way to put the fire out in order to get rid of it. Yeah. Or I'm cold.
So I've got to figure out a way of doing myself faster now because I've been slowed down.
Right. Okay. Right. Like these are things that like we already have conceptions about in regards to the kind of damage that we're doing and like what they can do. And so it just informs the gameplay a little bit more.
So this just says roll lots of dice.
Yeah, people like to roll lots of dice. I think that's when you're designing your game, if it's a combat-focused game, right? Because there's going to be narrative-focused games, and hi, you're not, I don't know why you're watching this video. If you're designing a narrative-focused game, we're not going to be able to help you there.
Not on this video.
No.
Maybe in other videos.
Yeah, definitely on other videos. But like for this one, it's like...
Yeah, we're talking about dealing damage. Again, if you're playing... Yeah, combat systems. If you're playing Kids on Bikes, unless you've homebrewed your own, there's not really a damage system in place for that.
And honestly, at that point, if you're homebrewing Kids on Bikes to be having a damage system, it's a completely different game at that point.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Because that's the thing is like going back to this topic of damage, you have the games where it's like it's narrative focused, so like you could roll dice once and that is the entire combat. Right? I'm going to fight this guy. All right. You both roll, whoever has the higher or whoever gets more successes, that's the person who wins. And that's your entire combat. And then you narrate the entire combat there. Yeah. What we're talking about is the combat focus systems where instead of one die roll determines everything, it's, okay, in the interim, right, the amount of damage you're dealing might like increase it, right? Or decrease it or this or that, right? Like the chance of you succeeding is not just because you rolled higher. It's because you were tactically aware and you dealt enough damage when you needed to and this and that, right? And so that's kind of what we're focusing on here. But ultimately, I have found people like rolling a lot of dice and having big numbers. So if you're going to have a damage system, let them roll a lot of dice. Yeah. Let them have big numbers.
Send their kids to camp, as they say.
Yeah. Because like, for example, in Traveler, you're always rolling 2d6 to do anything, right? Because it's a dice curve system. You should know statistically how easy it is for you to do something. But damage is anywhere from 1d6 to 6d6. And the amount of damage you deal can astronomically change.
Oh, yeah.
Right, something. And that's based off of the weapon you're using. And then also how much, soak your armor has and stuff like that. Yeah. Like, are you able to avoid all of the damage? No. Well, now I got to start thinking about where I'm putting that damage. And, do I need to get better armor? Yeah. And stuff like that. This is
ranges and area of effect.
Yeah, so it's almost like the creators of Traveler knew, like, people like to roll a lot of dice. So let's give them the chance to roll more than just 2d6. Yeah. Right, versus some other Powered by the Apocalypse games, which we'll get into, like Avatar and a few others of those, where it's more like flavorful.
Yeah.
People know, if it's a combat system, you want to be able to roll a lot of dice.
Yes.
The D&D designer specifically said that Fireball is overpowered for where it's at mechanically. It should not be a 3rd level spell with that rolling that many dice. But that's how it's always been, and people like rolling a lot of dice, and so they keep it that way.
Everyone loves the sound, the clickety-clackities.
Yeah, and like we said before, we've had players who determined an entire game based off how many dice they're rolling.
Unless the GM's getting all the clickety-clackities, then it's scary.
Yes. So yeah, I just put in there, roll lots of dice, big numbers. It's because people like to roll lots of dice and have big numbers.
Yeah, I mean, who doesn't want to have like a massive hit on someone, especially like if you're critting or sneak attacks, things of that nature.
I have found that if you're gonna have a system where it's like that, try to have a little bit of complexity, because the people who are going to enjoy that system are the ones who are like number crunching and like oh, I think I can do this and get more damage that way.
Optimizing.
Right. Yeah. They're optimizing. But if it's like, if they arrive to that point too quickly, they're not going to enjoy it as much.
Next thing we have here is the higher the success, the higher the damage.
Yes. This is basically going back to our success video and tiers of success. If I do okay at something, I do some damage. But if I do a little bit better at something, I do even more damage. If I do really good at something, I do a lot of damage. Yeah. Right? That's pretty much how it is. DC 20 is doing a version of this. Except, and this is where I know there's going to be some issue. Hi, people who like DC 20. Hi. We're here again.
Here we are. Once more.
You're not going to like what I have to say. I don't like how they do it. So here's what's going to be weird. Pathfinder does pretty much the same thing, and I like how Pathfinder does it. So then why am I mad at DC 20?
Let's find out, guys.
They're both the same. You have a target number to hit. If you do 5 above that, you do additional damage. If you do another 5 above that, you do even more damage. Okay. What about Pathfinder 2e it makes me enjoy that system, and DC 20 that makes me not?
You know what? Not a clue, man. You'll have to fill me in.
We've talked about it.
I'm sure we have.
You do bigger numbers. The numbers are bigger in Pathfinder than they are in DC 20. Right? And so we talked about this in several of our videos. Right? You could basically have it be like 1 hit point is equal to like 20 hit points in another system. Right. Pathfinder, because you roll more dice and because you do bigger numbers, it feels better. And also Pathfinder has it to where if you do so much more, you're critting. DC 20, when you hit, you deal like 2 damage. And then if you do 5 above it, it's 3 damage. Isn't that really cool?
I see.
Right? Like you can see how like the feeling of it is not as amazing as like Pathfinder, where it's like, all right, if I hit him, it's going to be 2d6. But if I do 5 extra more, it's 4d6. But if I do 10 above that, it's 8d6. Yeah. Oh man, I really hope I get 10 above it. Right? You can see like the fun in that versus I deal 4 damage. Yeah. Right? Like they're the same thing. There's a multiple of 4. Yeah. But one feels a lot better because it's bigger numbers and bigger rolling and bigger stuff like that.
I like the tiers of success because it informs a lot. Not just mechanically, but also narratively. It informs a lot to like, oh, you did such a good job at this skill, at this combat skill, that you took a lot more, it's almost like a last stand type thing too. Like I like those kind of moments where narratively where it's like, like how do you do this? Know, every player wants to hear that from their GM. Are there any other ways to do damage in, a system?
Yeah. So obviously we've talked about like the bigger numbers and like the combat-based systems. Let's talk about the narrative-based systems, right? Okay. So like Avatar: The Last Airbender, the way it works is it's more about like when you do damage, you gain a condition. And then if you've gained all 6 conditions, then you are out of the game. Now, obviously it's a little bit more than that. You basically have like several different things. And if you get off balance or if this happens or if that happens, then you're out of the game. Narratively. Yeah. Right. It's a very narrative focused game. Right. Of course, yep. But that allows for some more fun and some more interesting things there, right? Where like instead of it being I take damage, okay, my health goes from 100 to 80. All right, I got some time. We'll see how this goes. Yeah. Like, but then an attack comes out of nowhere and now you go from 80 to 20. And you're like, whoa. I thought I had at least 4 more hits. Suddenly now I only have maybe 1. Like that fear happens a lot more in the number crunchy games. Yeah. In a narrative focused game like Avatar, if I get all 6 statuses, I'm out of the game. And you can't usually get more than like 2. So like, the basics of the game. You know that I am only at max going to get 2. So you can do a lot more math. You can start figuring out a little bit more. But again, it's ultimately focused on the narrative. So it's creating a system where you're taking damage and you're losing your hit points. But it's more like, okay, instead of taking damage, you gained this you're afraid. Yeah, right. What happens that made you afraid? Well, he just threw a giant fireball at me. I'd be afraid. I've never had that happen to me before. Yeah. Is part of my skin on fire, maybe? Yeah. I don't know, right? These are like things you can think about in a more narrative-focused game.
I remember when we did our one-shot with that, I really enjoyed it because it didn't feel like you were going to go down every fight too. Sometimes when you're playing, games like 5e, it feels like, even especially in the earlier levels, like you can be fighting the weakest monster you could think of, and then just out of nowhere you go down. And no one wants to start a brand new character when they just started a campaign.
Right.
So I like the way Avatar does it because it gives you that opportunity to, like, okay, and then it lets you kind of change tactics a little too. You've got, okay, so this is my impact. So this is my condition. What can I do to circumnavigate this? What can I do to work around this?
Yeah, and then there's also like moves you can make.
Yeah.
Actions you can take in Avatar where you're like, I gain this condition. I am now spending my turn to get rid of this condition. Like, I'm afraid. My character then focuses, and in the middle of the battle, he tries to harmonize with himself and his spirit, and that causes him to no longer be afraid. So you're quote unquote losing a turn, but you're also healing and gaining it back. And again, what I like about Avatar is that there's different ways that you could be knocked out of it.
Yeah.
Right? You have your balance track where it's like, oh, I took damage. I'm pushed further into my balance. So like maybe you have things like friendship versus isolation. Those are your two like fighting things. And you take damage, you go further into isolation because you're like, if my friends weren't here, I wouldn't have to worry about them.
Right.
Yeah. And then you can be so far pushed off of that you're out of the combat. Yeah. Or you can take a lot of statuses, or you can lose all your strain, which is also a system that you need to use to do some of your abilities, which I'm always a fan of stuff like that. I think Lancer does that a little bit too, like resource management and being able to like, no, okay, I've done this, I've done that. I don't know exactly how much more damage I can take. So do I push myself? Do I not? Right. These are the things you got to think about.
Yeah. It's nice having these different options too. Cause again, in reality, hit points and damage is something that they don't really exist in the real world. If that's the case, we're all like one hit point away from dying. One bad car accident, not to be morbid, but with the games, it's nice to have these different flavors, these different options to deal damage and to counteract them as well.
Yeah. So do you have an idea out of all of the RPGs we played? And we played a lot, but not a bunch. Do you have an idea of one that's your favorite? I actually kind of like how Star Wars does it, where each weapon has like a base damage, and then the amount of successes you get on top of that are additional damage to that. Yeah. I think that's a really cool way to do it for sure.
Star Wars is cool. I like Traveler better because it feels like it's easier to come out of damage, unless it's like a super big one. Again, pretty much it's just you're basically in the med bay for X amount of days, which is fine because when you're traveling, it takes weeks to get where you need to go. So yeah, you may not be able to do the things you want to do, like I want to be able to get better at this skill. Well, you're stuck. You're laid up in the hospital.
Yeah,
basically.
I think that more fits into Traveler's health system than its damage.
Yeah, that's fair. As far as damage goes, I also liked Peter's Tales of Elsewhere damage.
Yeah, so the way Peter does it is that your damage type is determined by your weapon, right? So like, for example, if you're shooting with a gun, like it's a D8, but maybe you're using your fist and it's a D20. Now you might be thinking, oh, that's a bigger die. Wouldn't you want to use that? Here's how his system works. If you roll a 4 or higher, you deal a strain to them, right? So obviously the bigger the die, the more likely you are to only strain them.
Yeah.
However, if you roll a 3 or 2, it's a critical. It's a serious injury.
Yeah.
And then a 1 is a critical injury.
Yeah.
And then there's lethal injuries that you could also get.
Yeah.
And so the system is more about, okay, I deal damage to this guy. How many dice am I rolling? I'm choosing the lowest dice amongst them. And then if I have abilities that can knock down a tier, or if I chose my actions that can knock it down a tier.
Absolutely.
Because you can one-shot somebody in Peter's game.
Yeah.
You just have to specifically aim for their head and have abilities that allow you to one-shot them.
Yeah. And that's why I liked it too, because it gives you the option to, like you said, one-shot. There's not too many games where you can one-shot. TTRPGs where you can just one shot someone.
It's so broken.
It's so broken,
right.
Or it's super difficult, and just either it's impossible, or it's like you said, or it's very broken where like maybe only a certain class or character can do it.
Right, like 5th edition tried to have the assassin be able to do it, where it's like if they're unaware of you and you've gone in the initiative before them, and all of these things, then you can crit sneak attack, and you're hoping to do enough damage to kill them outright. But what I found is, most of the time you're not able to like assassinate a boss monster with that.
Yeah.
Which isn't as fun, right? Like think about it where it's like, you know that the villain is in that camp. Mm-hmm. You can go in, guns a-blazing, and you're going to have to fight all of these hordes. Or if you're tactical about it, you just get the right opportunity, assassinate the dude, right? Because like the amount of times in D&D where I'm like, yes, and the villain has poisoned you, and you're now slowly dying. Oh, you have 200 hit points, and it only does 40 hit points a round. Well, you're probably fine. Like the tension is gone. Versus something like Tales from Elsewhere, where you can, if you really work towards it and you really set yourself up for it, have the means of one-shotting someone. Yeah. But you have to set yourself up to get that far, and you have to get a little lucky. You have to get a little lucky.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
But it's consistent.
Yeah, so that's probably my favorite one. And again, I know we talk a lot about Tales of Elsewhere, especially me. I really did enjoy the game, and again, it's one of those things where I think it's just got a really good, crunchy combat system where it's not difficult to understand. It's very, very straightforward, but there's a lot of things you could take into consideration to do more damage. It's a good way to optimize that damage. Yeah.
Again, like I said, like Pathfinder. I do like Avatar. I think Avatar is probably the best narrative-focused damage system I've ever seen. I think it's so thematic, and I can instantly think of ways where it's like, I understand why your character is doing this or that. Mm-hmm. And again, when we one-shotted, for guys who haven't really played Powered by the Apocalypse games, you guys were describing things phenomenally. So I think the system is really a testament to that for sure. But then also Pathfinder. I really like Pathfinder 2e. I think
one day I'll play it. One day.
Maybe that day will be sooner than you think. We are possibly, I think we are, at some point, running polls to see what our one-shot should be. We're planning to do a one-shot.
Yep.
And it's quite possible we've already run the polls, and we're still running the polls. Check our community tab. We run polls and ask for your guys' opinions on stuff. That's the way you can, show your support to us in one way or another.
Yeah, and have your voice kind of in what we do.
Absolutely. Anything else you want to talk about damage-wise? I don't like taking damage, personally.
No one likes taking damage.
Everyone wants to deal it.
Yeah.
But also, there's always that fun thing of like, I have 1 hit point left. Let me see if I can kill the big bad. Yes! That's always fun. But
narratively, but I'm at the age where damage just happens over time now.
It's true. Well, and if we're talking about Traveler, you roll for old age, and it is true. You take damage.
I feel like I've rolled for old age in my life. So.
Yeah. We got to talk about character creation at some point because Traveler does it super well.
So good.
Yeah. So. If you want to see us talk about character creation, let us know in the comments. Or if you want to see us talk about any specific mechanic that a bunch of different RPGs do, whether it's good or bad, let us know in the comments because we're always looking for videos that you guys want to watch and that YouTube's going to recommend to people. But we only can do that if you tell us what to do. Otherwise, we're going to make something about like how to make cake for our RPG channel.
We're not going to do that.
Why not? I want cake.
Oh, yeah.
We should make an RPG about making cake and call it Cooking Mama. Did you ever play Cooking? I have not played Cooking Mama.
I have not played it.
Stay witty.
Yeah.
We're going to flesh this concept out. Okay, but hear me out. What if the cake does damage over time?
It does. It's called weight gain and obesity. Today we talk about the damage of math.
Nope.
Math of damage. I messed it up. I knew I did. As soon as I said, I was like, oh, that's not right.